So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. So I'm excited today to show you what I consider to be the ultimate ridgeline design that I've come up with. So what you'll see here is I've got my spool of 550 paracord. I've got number 36 tarred nylon bank line. And I've got my multi-tool and my lighter. So that's all it'll require for this project. And so if you're interested in the ultimate ridgeline development and how to do it yourself, stay tuned. Okay, well, without further delay, I'll just get on with the build, yeah? So I'm going to take about 50 foot or so off this spool just to have a hank of paracord to work with, yeah? So I'll go do that off camera and I'll come back when it's ready. Okay, so I've spooled up that 50 foot of rope just so I can keep it on camera half decent, yeah? And I did it in a quick deploy fashion, so if you watched previous videos of mine, you know exactly how this is done. But all I'm going to do now is take the lead end, if you will. I'm going to pull some out of that and just set that spool to the side. And realistically here, I'm just going to want to put a bite in the line. And I'm going to want to have this be a length of about 2.5 feet from here to here, so doubled up on itself. You get the idea. But now right at the point where I've folded it back here, I'm just going to pull this into center camera a bit better. So right at this point in time, I'm just going to turn around and do a little overhand knot right here. So nothing complex at all. I just put a loop in the line with both strands. Kind of pinch it now to hold it so I can get that opening. I'm going to take the end of the loop and just feed it through, the end of the bite, if you will. And just feed that through. And I'm going to tie that knot nice and close up to right at the end here. So I've got now room to work with. So pretty simple. I'll just change camera angles and I'll carry on, yeah? Okay, so for the next step in the process, it's really simple as well. So there's that little knot we just put in. I'm going to put my finger at about a finger and a half length. And right here, I'm just going to tie another knot. So I made that little opening, feed it through. Simple little overhand knots, right? Nothing to them. And I want to make sure that the paracord is sitting flat against each other here. And I don't want this knot to be much bigger than, say, 2 or 3 of the knots themselves. The space in between these, about maybe 2 to 3 times the size of the knots, yeah? And I'm going to keep doing this process now. And put another one in. And I'm just going to kind of hold it back and get an idea for the size of it, if you will. Make sure I'm sitting at about the same distance from each other and make sure that those paracord lines are pushed through and sitting as flat as they can be with each other. That's an important little piece. And tighten it off there. I'll do it another time. So I recommend having a minimal of 4 of these knots. And you can see, really, really simple. There's nothing to them. And I'll just check my spacing to make sure it's pretty even. Hey, Davis. And now, let's see if I can get away with one more. It's not critical, but you want to have at least 4, but you can go more. Yeah, that should be half decent then. So in this example, we'll do it with 5, I guess. But it's really flexible, and you'll see why as we move through this project of the flexibility of this whole concept. But that's all I've done now is really folded a bite in the line that was 2.5 foot in length and then tied overhand knots back down towards the loop. So I have, in essence, this is exactly the same as I do an eye on a traditional Guyline or other things that you've seen in lots of my previous videos. All I've done is kept this a bit longer and added some additional knots, yeah? Nothing to it. So we'll move on to the next step, yeah? Okay, so the only other thing I have to do for the main ridgeline body, if you will, is I'll just pull that back. And I'm just going to put a little overhand knot in the very other end of the ridgeline. So the exact same kind of knot we just did there. I'm just going to turn around and, you know, pretzel knot, if you will. And just set that on. And that's the other end of the main body of the ridgeline completed. So really elementary, nothing to this. You'll find that the knots we use throughout this are really, really simple. And like I say, I'm just hanking my rope back up because I put that little stopper knot, keep everything tight as much as possible. Just kind of lock and hold that. So yeah, that's all it was just we put 5 knots down, bite in the line. I'm going to end up, I'll just set this aside, I'm going to end up doing the exact same thing now with some tarred bank line. And so I'm going to turn around and, like I say, find about 2.5 foot or so. So, you know, it's not exact measurement stuff, doesn't need to be, but you know, obviously give yourself a half decent size there. And the exact same thing, I'm just going to kind of hold it, do a little overhand knot loop, and feed it through and set that on the line. And I'm gonna now turn around and go down this line and just do the multiples exactly as we just did on the main paracord ridge line, except this time, like I say, we're just using the tarred bank line. And I'm gonna make the spaces a little bit bigger on these ones, just to find the dynamics of working with the tarred bank line just to be a little bit different, that's all, because of the difference in diameter of the cordage. So make sure I'm sitting at roughly about the right space. Looks about good. Same thing again. Make the space fairly even between them all. Give that a bit of tension. Just give it a pull across the lines, make sure everything's good and firm. So now what I'm going to do is take my pocket knife and just turn around and cut off that spare little bit of end there. And I'll give that a melt to make sure things don't fray. In fact, I'll just melt those two together to each other if I can get away with it. There we go. Let's just keep it clean, right? So I now have this unit where it's got 4 knots down along it and a loop on the end. I need to make 6 of these units. You know, you can make varied amounts, so I'm just going to do 6 in this example, and then we'll turn around and hook those onto the main body of the ridgeline, and we'll show you how it progresses as we go. Yeah. Okay, so just as fast as that, I've got 2 done. You want to kind of keep them similar size, and you want to have it that they have at least 4 knots on each one. You know, this is flexible. You could go 5 or 6 or 7 knots on each one. You could have the eyelets be smaller and stuff. It doesn't have to be exact for every single one going down the line. The only key, in my perspective, the only key critical part is it's just good to have 4 knots on the line to be able to do what we want to achieve. Yeah. So like I say, I'll go off and make the other 4, and then we'll move on to the next step of the build. Okay, so as you can see, there was nothing overly complex here. I just kept doing the same thing over and over again, and I could make these, as many of these as I want. You know, realistically, you need a minimal of 4 of them, but the longer your ridge line is, or the more of these you want to have on the line, it's really flexible in that regard. When it comes to these knots, you could put them closer together. You could have more than 4. 4 is kind of a minimal to me, but one way or the other, we've got all the basic components now. So let's assemble these 6 units that we've now just created back onto the main ridge line, yeah? Okay, so for the next step, I just set up that ridge line to have a bit of tension into it, so I've got a line to work with, if you will. And what I'm going to do is start to take these individual units now, and I'll try to position myself decent on camera here. I'm just going to turn around and hold the loop and kind of come under the line. I'm holding the loop, and I'm just wanting to feed it through itself now, as such. So it should look like that. Hopefully the camera's getting that justice. And then I'm going to come again. And one more time around. Making sure I don't catch any of those knots as I go. And really I'm just applying a prusik to the line now. So as I let off tension, I'm pulling down on the main line, if you will, this part here. I'm pulling down on that as I'm letting the tension set for the prusik. And hopefully the camera's picking that up decently. And as the prusik comes down to itself, you just make sure you keep all your lines nice and straight. And now that prusik is on the line, nice and clean. I'll just double check my camera. Yeah, the prusik's on the line nice and clean now. Now, if I apply tension, it'll lock in either direction. But if I don't have any tension, I can just slide this on the line, yeah? So I'm going to do the exact same setup that I just did to strap this string of knots on the line, if you will, to strap them on. I'm going to do the same thing over and over again with the next 5. And they're going to be spaced down the line every, say, 4 or 5 feet as I go. So I'll just go put those on because hopefully you got a good example there. And we'll cut back to the next scenes, yeah? Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes now. It literally takes no time to really do this. But you can see I've got all my prusiks strapped onto the line now, where it's all easily adjustable. So I can shift and space those out on the line freely. And, you know, if you wanted to add in another 4 more or whatever, this system's really flexible in that regard. And, you know, to me, the more the merrier that's set on this line to a certain degree, you know, but when you want to bundle everything up for a rapid release later on, to have it that this stuff all just comes apart smooth, you kind of hit a limit of how many of these you can strap on a line within reason. But either way, we're pretty well there now. This Ridgeline has been fully assembled, and the next step is going to be just taking it out in the field and showing you how it works, yeah? All right, fellow YouTubers, well, I'm out at one of my local parks right in the neighborhood close to where I live. So needless to say, I'm getting ready to set up the example here. So I brought along my Rab Sill Tarp 2. I've got a couple tent pegs. I've got that Ridgeline we just built earlier through the video there. And I've got these, and they're going to be 2 Guylines that I'm going to end up using just to tie down the bottom corners. And I'll go through those in detail as we do out the example, yeah? But I've got 2 trees here. I'll shift camera angles and I'll show you the trees I'm going to set up to, and then I'll show you why this Ridgeline setup is just so amazing. Alright, so like I say, I got 2 trees picked out. The one right here and then the one over here, and I'm going to strap up between the 2 of those. Like I say, if you hear a bit of noise in the background, the local park mat's fairly popular and it's a long weekend, so you might pick up noise, such as life, right? But either way, what I'll do now is I'll walk through the details of each step of setting up the Ridgeline up close and in detail, and then afterwards I'll go back and do a live kind of real-time example of setting it up to show you how rapid it truly is and how flexible it truly is. Okay, so first order business, I'm just gonna pull, so the end that we first created with the loop and the 5 knots, and I'm just going to pull a bit of that out, just throw my hank down. This end I'm going to wrap around the tree. I'm going to come fully around with that set of knots, if you will, and then here I'm just going to turn around and lay my main part of the Guyline on top, and then I'm going to take one of these knots that's here in the line, and I'm going to bring that over top, and I'm just going to hook it into the little pockets, if you will, between the knots. I'm just going to hook it into there and make sure it's in good and solid. And then I'm going to start to apply tension. And I'll come in and give a close-up of this. But just to show you, I'm locked and I'm on there now. There's no, that's not going to give. I'm on there good and solid. It's definitely strapped to the tree with full effect. And when I want to take it off now, it's going to be as easy as grabbing this loop and pulling it out, and I'm off. It's just that simple. So I'll turn around and just strap it back to the tree one more time. Like I say, you kind of bring it all the way around. Make sure you get a couple knots on either side of the main Ridgeline cord. Just going to bring one of these knots up, bring it across, going to open up a little pocket in between the line of knots, and just stuff one of the knots through, and then just kind of set it in there, and I'll start to apply tension. And I'm on there. I'll stop here because this is already kind of held and locked now, if it's not going anywhere. And I'll shift camera angles and come up and do a real close-up, and you can see exactly what's happening here. Okay, so hopefully you can see what's going on, where I'm literally taking the rope with the knots, just gonna wrap it back over of the main ridgeline, and I'm gonna take one of the knots and just stuff it back through one of its previous little pockets there. And then as soon as you do that, the tension on the line pinches down, kind of locks that knot in so it's not going anywhere. So, and then you simply just kind of slide it along and adjust it. And the beautiful part about it is this will hold as soon as the tension's being applied. It becomes tighter and tighter in along here, and makes it that there is no chance of this coming loose and this knot just flipping out, and that just doesn't happen. So you're absolutely good in that regard. But like I say, as soon as you want to kind of rapid release and get this off the tree, you simply pull this out, it comes free, that's it, it's off, and as you can see, it's done, or freely detached from the tree. So I'll just put this back on, stuff it in. Know that I'm set on this side now, and it's really just putting the knot that I pushed through the little opening, just pushing it back onto the previous knot so it locks and holds, and the tension will just set this here and it's not going anywhere. That's strapped on perfectly well. So now we'll flip over to the other tree and we'll strap on that side as well. Yeah. All right. So now, like I say, given that I've got this all in a rapid release bundle, it's easy enough for me to walk this out now to get to my other tree. Yeah. And I'll stop and shift camera angles here, and I'll show you exactly how I strap onto this tree. So now I'm going to take this Ridgeline now, and I've got those lines that we put on there earlier in the video for the install. I've got one of these slid far enough along this line to come around the tree. So I'll just show you that now. Yeah. Where pick roughly the height I want it at and come back around. And there's one of those lines that I have on there. Hopefully the camera's seeing that justifiably. And what I'm going to do now is on this end, I'm going to turn around and use two of these lines, and really one's going to lock into the other and become the same kind of locking shackle, but rather than locking to itself, it's just locking to another one. So I'm going to open up the little pocket, I'm going to stick my knot through just like I showed earlier with the main paracord. I'm going to kind of hold that for a second, and I'm going to apply a little bit of tension. And really, the more tension I apply right at this point, the more it's going to want to hold it tautly. So one way or the other, I'm already on and I'm locked and it's fairly rigid. I'll shift in the camera angles and I'll show you up close of what I just did here so you can see it in detail. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn around and detach this, and all of these are quick release. Every one of these connections that you see, you can easily just pop it off later. It's one of the real beauties of the setup. But I'm just going to turn around and pop this off and re-show the example. Yeah, so all I simply do is turn around and pull up on that knot. It frees all the tension off, and these are separated. So really I've got one sitting here and I've got one here, and in fact I'll just bring this one up a bit so that you guys can hopefully see this well. Then all I'm doing is I'm going in the second knot on one of these, and I'm coming up and I'm just hooking it through the two lines here. I'm going to open it up, that little pocket, and I'm just going to hook my knot in and set it in place. And then I'm going to apply that tension, and that locks that. It's not going anywhere. Like I say, it's already set up as a quick release and everything. So I can apply tension this way now on that line, and it's locked, it's holding it, it's not going anywhere. And I know some people that view my videos don't like these kind of connections because they're concerned that they're not getting the same tension as like a taut line hitch or a trucker's hitch and that kind of thing. So I'm going to shift camera angles again here, and I'm going to show you exactly how with this setup I can get that kind of tension really rapidly that's equal to or better than like a trucker's hitch or any of that business. You know, it can do the equivalent of that. So let me shift camera angles and I'll show you that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is kind of stand on this side, and that way I keep my body out of the view as much as I can, right? But so we've got, like I say, these two lines that were just kind of interconnected here, and you can see it's all rapid release just like the green one was down on the end, you know, hooking the paracord onto the tree. Same thing, if I pull this, it just pops. But I'm going to take the paracord now, the remainder of that ridgeline, because we had more paracord ridgeline than the length that was needed, it gives this flexibility in the regard of I can now take this line and I'm going to come up to this side. I'm going to open it up between the two knots on this line, you know, hanging line, if you will. I'm going to feed a bite through that as such, and then I'm just going to apply tension just as you would like a trekker's hitch right at this point. Then you'll see that as I apply tension, slack starts to form between these two lines that are connected, and I can just slide that prusik along. So it's easy enough for me to turn around and apply ample amount of tension, move it along, and keep doing that just like you would a trekker's hitch or just like you would a taut line hitch. There is no real difference in the level of tension capabilities you can achieve here. I'll pull it some more, set it, and now I'm getting extremely tight on this ridgeline. I'll try to really crank down on it to show you the effectiveness of the likelihood of this thing given just isn't happening. So unless you've done your knots wrong here, and you simply just reset your knots, it's not a complex thing. But I'll pull out more tension. There we go. Now that's amazingly tight, and in order to kind of free up the remainder of the ridgeline, I simply just pull that back out. There's no knots involved. That's off now. It's just back to hanging as a drip line, if you will. And now this is super tight. There's no question that these are just holding on for dear life when it comes to the tension of this, you know. And now we'll walk back down and show you where we've got those other knot lines hanging. Then we'll kind of walk through their uses and what we can do with them. Yeah. So, and then like I say, what I've done here is spaced out those knot lines now. I've spaced those out every couple feet along my ridgeline. I got one here, 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 and you could have them every, you know, 4 or 5 feet all the way up the line, just freely available to use, you know, at your leisure kind of thing. But the thing really is going to be, all right, let's use the, well, just push this one to the side just in case we need it for something later. We'll use this one here to strap one corner of the tarp to. I'll leave one for if I was to hang a lantern or hang items in the center of my tarp setup, and then I'll use the other one just to strap on the other corner of the tarp. Yeah, and like I say, these are all freely adjustable, easy to move. I can shift them all with ease. There's no effort to it at all, and place them exactly where I want them. But one way or the other, let's get this tarp set up and show you how easy it is to hook that onto this setup. Okay, so now I got my tarp. I just pulled out a little corner loop on the end of the tarp that I can hook onto. Yeah, so I'm simply going to do the same kind of thing like I was doing earlier. I'm just going to feed my line right through the tie out, and then I'm going to just get it, and I always find it's good practice, instead of going off the first knot, I like going off the second. But I'm going to come up, hook over, and just hook it in the exact same way we were doing with all the others, and that's on now. It's not going anywhere. I'll just make sure the knot is rested, and really I want the one knot that I just pushed through the separator loop, if you will. I just want to make sure that's butted right up against that knot, so it's really got nowhere to go to begin with, and we're already strapped on at this point. It's really that easy. There's no need for toggles, there's no need for carabiners or all that fancy stuff. None of that's needed. This is definitely a solid way to go, and it's quick release. Like I say, if I don't want to have this on here, I simply just pull and the whole thing pops off and my tarp is free. But I'll just put it back on, make sure it's set in nice and clean, and I always leave my end bit hanging back out so I can quick release it later. I can just grab on to the little loop, whichever the loop is on the end, and give it a pull with my finger if it gets stuck in there a little bit, and one way or the other it just comes out with ease. So it's not really a big deal to get this out, but like I say, it will hold it firmly and snugly, and as the tension applies on this line, it just cinches in around that knot and gives it nowhere to escape to. So that's really the beauty of this setup. I'll go hook on the other corner now, and I'll try to do a up close on that so you guys can see. And you know, I want to show this at a bit of a distance, and then I'll do the really up close. Yep. Okay, so now I've just got the tie out on the other corner of my tarp, and try to show that as detailed as I can here. So I'm just going to feed the line right up through. I'm going to get past that second knot so that it's set on the line here. And then I'm going to take that second knot, I'm going to bring it up, I'm going to open up the little pocket in between the two, I'm going to feed my knot through, and then kind of apply a bit of tension right back at the knot. Hopefully the camera's seeing that well. Right here, then kind of set it against that, and it's locked. It's not going anywhere. And then that's my quick release tab I can just pull on. Now I can turn around and just slide the prusik along the line, and now I can apply all the tension in the world I want, and this will just lock and hold. And there was no toggles needed or none of that business, you know. It's all just being done by tension and knots. So hopefully you can see that in detail. And like I say, it's easy enough to just turn around and slide that prusik along the line and apply as much tension as needed. And I'll pan back and show you that it's a good taut line coming across the top, yeah? So you can see now, lots of tension that exists on this tarp. It's able to hold up really well. And it's easy enough if I wanted to adjust this and say, oh, I want this 3 or 4 inches that way. But just press on my prusik, loosen a bit of tension on that side, and then come over to this side and apply that tension. And it just locks, and I'm back to a taut position. It's just that easy. And like I say, if I want to quick release any of these connections that I'm doing anywhere along the ridgeline, it's as simple as pulling it and I'm off the line. Like, you can't make it any more simple than that, right? So I turn around and just give myself a bit of slack and put that back on. And you can see how quickly these things can go back on the line. If there's nothing to it, it's really just that fast. And I'm back in business and I'm locked and set. No knots needed. Once you've built this out, this thing is super flexible and you'll never have to tie any knots with it. It just does everything you need it to do. And we're back to a taut position. So I'll go and grab those other 2 guidelines that I have there. Now, I never showed that out in the build because I thought it'd just be easy enough to explain and you guys got the idea anyways. But let's go peg out those other 2 back corners, yeah? Okay, so now I'll show you the guidelines that I'm going to be using. They're made exactly the same as we did everything else earlier in the video. You know, I'm using the number 36 tard bank line, and I've done those same knots where, you know, we got the little spaces between them every couple inches, you know, and kind of all the way along. So they call this jungle loops. That's the name of this kind of method of doing things. And typically speaking, jungle loops aren't attached to the prusiks and that kind of stuff like I do on my ridgeline. They come as just a solid line of knot after knot after knot after knot. These guylines that I have here are about 7 foot long, to give an example, but there's people that'll make these, you know, 50 foot long and use these as their primary guyline. I just don't think they're quite as effective as doing the method that I've come up with here. But like I say, I don't mind using them for guylines to tie off the corners of tarps and that kind of stuff. I just don't think they're quite as good at being a ridgeline, and that's one of the reasons why I developed this ridgeline system. So one way or the other, we'll turn around and hook this on to the other corners of the tarp and just get it all strung up and taut so you guys can see the full tent setup, or tarp setup, sorry. Okay, so there's quite a few different ways you can kind of connect these. You could easily feed this through, open the loop, set a toggle in there if you wanted to use a toggle, and just kind of lock it on. Or you can just loop it over on itself and pull the remainder through, and that way it's just kind of permanently lashed to the end of your tie out as such. But if you want the quick release to happen on both sides, we'll just pop that back out again, yeah? So if you want the quick release to happen on both sides though, you got to do this kind of hot connection, if you will, where all I'm doing now is pulling through a couple more of the knots, and I'm gonna take one knot, gonna bring it up, feed it through exactly as we've shown multiple times now, and just kind of hook that, and it should look like that. Hopefully the camera's giving that justice. I'm trying to get it in decent lighting. I know it always gets tricky, but that's the thinking, where that's hot connect and it's quick release when you do it this way, where you can just pull it, it pops off, and it's done and it's free. So one way or the other, I'll just hook those on, and we'll go and get a tent peg in the ground and get hooked onto that, yeah? Okay, so now I'm just going to take a simple tent peg and plug that into the earth. Now, you can just as easily turn around and open this up, hook your loop on, and you're there. Totally valid way to set it up, easy enough to kind of connect onto it. You're not having to even do the quick release or anything here, you know, and it's easy enough to just pop off. Or you can turn around and do the exact same thing where you come around, you take your knot, you walk it up, stick it through, and kind of let it hold tension there, set it in, and I'm locked on at this point in time. And hopefully the camera is able to see that, where the knot's kind of held to itself. And this is good for, you know, doing the quick release is good for if there's a little nub in the ground that's just, you know, some root coming up out of the ground then back down into it, and it's just a little, you know, aisle or eye, if you will, that you can latch onto, and it's easy enough to pop that and it's all quick release. It comes off, and you can easily turn around and, you know, adjust your tension this way as well, where say you want a bit more tension on the tarp, just adjust which eyes you're hooking onto, you know, and kind of, oh, I want a bit more tension, okay, just pull it, open it up, stick it in, set it against that knot, make sure it's kind of locked in behind the knot, and I'm on. It's just that easy, and it's there, it's, you know, tight, it's not going anywhere, it's holding it well. All right, let's get the last one in, yeah? So I'll just put in a tent peg to give me something to bind to. Nothing fancy. Like I say, there's lots of different ways you can use toggles within these systems, but one of the beauties I really like about this system is it replaces the need for toggles entirely. You don't really need to have any type of toggles in your lines whatsoever to be able to successfully get your tarp set up and to be tight and all that happiness. Simply just put my knot in, apply tension, and make sure that my knot's set firmly back against the last one that I want to hold it, and I'm on. I'm going to come down to my tent peg, just make sure that's in good. Come down to my tent peg, come around, lock my line, and I'm on. Like I say, no knots needed whatsoever once you've actually got the basic setup done, and you can adjust this to adjust your tension and all that, and then I'll come back out and show you how tight this is set up, yeah? So as you can see, it sets up nicely with a taut tarp setup, you know, everything's nice and firm, it's not going anywhere, it's all rock solid, it just holds on, and it does a nice setup. I'll shift over and show you the end where it's hanging on the Ridgeline to show you how little drag there is, because the Ridgeline did have the tension it did, yeah? Even though I've applied tons of tension on this end, yeah? So, and you can see here where the Ridgeline is extremely taut, you know, that using the knot as a trucker's hitch equivalent just allows for amazing amounts of tension, and it causes it where, you know, even though I'm pulling tension on this corner with the prusik, I'm not really getting too much change of angle that would normally happen on the paracord, you know, if there wasn't enough tension on this line. So as you can see, you know, that's totally on tight. This is a rock solid setup. You don't need to tie any knots when you're out in the field. Every single connection is all quick release. It was brain dead simple to make this whole thing. Now realistically, you can assemble this entire construct for the Ridgeline in like less than half an hour. It's really a simple task to do using simple knots like I showed earlier. And I'll step the camera back and I'll show you a live pull down to show you how fast I can tear this all down, and then I'll do one full live time walkthrough or real-time walkthrough of setting up the Ridgeline itself so you can see how fast it really is. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is just get the tarp off the Ridgeline, yeah? So I'm just gonna come over to my quick releases that are on these, pull them. That one's free. That one's free. Put my knots out. But that Ridgeline is, or Guyline, sorry, is totally off now. My tent peg. Just keep everything together so don't lose it. Same kind of thing on this side. Do my quick release, my quick release, get it out of the tie-up. My Guyline's back up into a loop again, back there. Took a little dirt with me, such is life. It's not like it's the first time that's ever happened. Well, either way, so they're off. Then when it comes to the other ones, it's just the same. Quick release, it's popped, that corner's off. Quick release, popped, that corner's off. I mean, let's face it, you don't really get faster pull downs than that with any other system that I know of. So I'll just feed my tarp all back in the bag, and it's not much faster, or sorry, not much slower to set it all up, other than the fact that if I stop to show everything in camera angles and all that so you can see what's going on. When you're out in the field and you're just setting this up real time, it's just that fast to set up as it is to tear down, and that's one of the real magics to this. And you don't need to have a lot of external gear. I don't need toggles, I don't need, you know, tent pegs used as toggles on my tree or any of that business. It's all a self-contained system that way. And the longest part is just getting the tarp back in the bag. Such is life, right? My big mitts always have a hard time with these. I know people always ask questions about what the tarps are and everything else, so I'll just make comment. I think I already mentioned it earlier, but I'll just make comment again for the people that are curious. That's a RAB sill tarp 2. And now when it comes to the Ridgeline, in real time I'll stop and shift angles here. Now when it comes to this Ridgeline, let's get you back here, say. I know you're bouncing around, it's all part of live demos, so do the same for the speed of getting this Ridgeline off. I'm off that tree. Come to this end, come to this end, top at least, I'm off that tree as well. Now, because I turn around and have the knot lines dropped every 4 or 5 feet along the line, it gives me the ability to quick release this setup too and integrate it all in. So I'm just gonna turn around and do quick release windings. I've shown this in lots of previous videos in the past. When it comes up to the knot lines, I'm just gonna press those right against my line and just hold it as I'm going. And I'm just gonna literally add it right into my figure 8 setups. Come across the next one, just wind it in like it was part of the line. If I see they're a little too close together, I can easily just move one. Carry on with my figure 8s. As such. I know I'm going to need a bit more room because I just know the size of my hands. And as you can see, it wasn't really some... I'm just caught on the tree. Hold on. So I'll just carry on with the quick release bundling, and this is really for the next time, so when you're out in the field you can just turn around and hot strap on without having to even fiddle with your bundle. When I get down to having a couple feet left of the line, just turn around and wrap it around that way. Like I say, that's my Hank bundle now that would normally sit in my bag, and it's got all the connections and everything else to lash onto the tarp, toggle free. Like I say, this to me is probably the ultimate setup. Out of all the Ridgelines I've ever made in my life, and there's been lots of them, this one by far is the best. By leaps and bounds, this is better than anything else I've ever used. And like I say, the knots were really simple. You had what, 2 knots to make this? The overhand knot, and you had the Prusik loop. And that was all it took to get this Ridgeline together. But I'll shift camera angles, and I'm going to do real time now of setting this Ridgeline up to show you exactly how quick it is without me stopping to shift scenes and all that kind of stuff, yeah? All right, let's get on with the real time example, yeah? Get this bad boy strapped up. On that side. Now I can, like I say, all my connections are already spaced out on the line, and you can see I could quick release there. I'll come around this way this time. Make sure I got the one that I can slide up on this side of the tree. Just the other one. Position it where I want it. Like that, I'm on. Already applying tension. Making sure that that's just locked, that knot. Now if I want the extra tension like I was talking about earlier to be the equivalent of like the trucker's hitch or that kind of thing, I put my Ridgeline through, give it a pull here, creates all this slack, and I can just walk that out until I get whatever tension is needed. Pull my line back through, and that is tight. It's not going anywhere. It's just that simple. This is the ultimate Ridgeline. If you ask me, this is the most flexible and most generic setup. It's the most rapid. It's just the best all around. If there's any Ridgeline I'm going to recommend, it's going to be this one. And like I say, it's all really flexible. You could have a couple more knots that sit on each one of these if you wanted a bit of flexibility in that regard of what knots you were going around. You could have a couple more of these sitting on the line. So, you know, right now I've got 6. You could have 8 or 10 depending on how many you wanted to have on the line. You could easily lash off and go to other lines that are connecting in different directions, you know, that are all binding back to a central point, if you will. It's a super flexible setup. It's the best I know. So on that note, I'll shift camera angles and rebundle my stuff back up, and I'll start to wrap it up, yeah? I might as well just take it down for you. Like I say, just put that all right back into a bundle again. So it's ready to go. Now I know the last couple Ridgeline videos I've shown, I've had some pretty cool stuff in them. And really, they're probably some of the more advanced Ridgelines that exist on the planet. But if you ask me, these or those really just don't compare to this. These are the best. They are by far the best. And if you wanted to have a setup with these where you were using them as guylines as well, you know, you go with shorter lengths of paracord. Instead of having 6 of the knot lines tied in like we did for this Ridgeline, you just put 2 on those so that they've got adjustable, you know, ends on both ends, and then you can have all the adjustability like you would with any other guyline systems I've shown, and no knots or toggles or any of that business needed. It just all becomes obsolete with this structure, and you're not having to worry about having the extra bulk of having toggles and stuff in your bag. Don't get me wrong, I like using toggles too, but this setup just replaces them. So if you enjoy this type of content, now please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, yeah? Like I say, the ultimate Ridgeline.